Hello, I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to use my procedural art framework thingy so that uh, you can make a City 17 lookalike procedurally generated at just the click of one button. So just to kind of show around the little pre-made thing of what we have around here, just so you have a bit of an idea of some of the parts that we're looking at. This is kind of how it looks like. And for all the editing stuff, you have all these little things here, and the main button is going to be right down here at the generation manager. You can click this, and once you have everything set up, it's going to take a moment, and then just do the whole thing. Do not worry about the relatively poor performance when you have everything selected. That is just an editor only thing. The code is optimized and it should run quite well, especially when you're in play and especially if you're going to build. So how the heck do you get all of this? So I'm gonna go ahead and go to a demo scene, which is just a completely empty scene that I just made, and I'm going to showcase everything from the very beginning of what you need. Just gonna go ahead and make a quick 3D object just for a cube, just so that we have a little base for us to set things up on over here. This is completely unnecessary, it's just a little thing that I like to do just so that we have a little basis over here. And I'm gonna go ahead and drag some material that I have onto here as well, just so that it's not that horrible white. So I'm gonna go ahead and just make an empty game object. And we're just gonna reset it so that it's not in the middle of nowhere. Just gonna put it a little up and to the side. And what we want to do first and foremost is make the facade of the building. What this is, it's one of the walls of the building, and you're going to be using these to make the buildings that you have. You're going to need to add two components here. Everything that you're going to need is going to be under the C17. If you just look up C17, this is pretty much everything that's being used for all the specific buildings, and particularly if you want to just kind of building generation stuff, this is where you find all the stuff. So you're going to need a C17 facade, and you're going to need a C17 facade parameter. The main thing here that you're going to want is you're going to want to be putting things into the C17 facade parameters. Here, all you're going to really care about from stuff here is while you are demoing your facade, you might want to put in some numbers here so that you can see some stuff. So for example, just put like a 7 over here, a 5 over, sure, a 5 over here. You can take this box. Don't worry about the rest. This is just so we see something what we're generating, so you can check and see if things are looking okay. What you want to then drag into here is in the wall style, you're going to want to click this little plus thing. I would recommend having 4 elements over here. And here you have a few things. You have elements that have a floor type and another like wall style and another list in here. This is going to be all the different types of floors that your this type of wall can have. So we're going to want to have one ground floor. We're going to want to have one roof, and then all the other stuff that you have is up to you to decide to kind of mix and match pretty much however you want. What I would recommend is you should always have one plain floor somewhere. This should be just a basic wall thing without anything too fancy on it, and then you can have a window floor, for example. So here is where a few particular quirks of this generation come into place, where you're going to want to be a bit careful with how you do stuff. What you are going to be dragging here is game objects. The ground floor will need 2 elements over here. Everything else will only need 1. You could, if you want, add more in here if you want more variety through each floor, but it will end up looking a little chaotic. So, you can experiment with it as you please, but if you don't like what you're seeing or you run into any issues, just go down to 1 element for each of these, except for the ground floor. For the ground floor, make sure that you always have 2. How you're going to want to drag in your substances and your look thingies. What game objects should you use? You should use quads. So if we go over here and we right click, we can create a 3D 3D object quad. This is going to be your building blocks for everything that you do. You can name them, whatever you want, whatever type of like building block here. I'll call this like standard building block. It does not matter whatsoever. Um, if we also reset this so that it's not in the middle of nowhere, we can kind of see it over here. It's just like a basic quad that's in here. It's actually on this side. Can't see it too well because it's white on a gray background. But basically, what you want to do is you might want to remove the mesh collider because you don't need it, and then you can simply go where you have your materials and you can select it. Like for example, here I'll drag this thing in, and I'm just gonna grab the material and drag it onto the quad if I can even find it. I'm just going to drag it over on here. Just should now be able to see it. Yes, it's on over on this side. Yeah, and this is it. You just gotta make most of your like plain building blocks just like this. Just make a quad, put your texture onto it, and then once you're done with that, just you're going to want to save it as a prefab. So make sure that you have a folder prefabs, and in it you can break this down however you want. Just like have a folder for quads, and then you can have all of these here with all of your stuff. What you want to be careful with is when it comes to windows, which I'll also demonstrate over here. I'm going to remove the mesh collider. I'm going to call this like a window building block. Doesn't matter, don't worry about my spelling. But basically what you are going to want for your window is you're going to want to drag in the material that you want for on the base thing. This is a quad, not a material. My bad, excuse me. Let's take this marble brick and just drag it on over here. So now I have this marble brick little quad over here. And then what you're going to want to do is go onto the thing that's supposed to represent your window, right click on it, 3D object, add a quad to it as a child. This is going to be the window itself. You're going to want to offset this by minus 0.01. And at least I personally like to scale this down to a 0.75. You can do this however you want, really, to showcase your window itself. This specific thing is just how I do it. What matters is that when you want to have your window building block, you need to have a main material, the thing that you want for the general wall of that floor, behind it on the material of the parent, and then the child must have the material of the window itself, which if I go over here, for example, I can drag in this, and bada bing bada boom, this is how I have it. Now, if your window material also has, like by itself, like a little background of a thing, you can again just make sure that like this thing is at a 111, make sure that all of your quads are at say 111, all your at least parented quads. Make sure that this thing has the same texture as like the thing that you have behind your window, and then what you can simply do is instead of scaling this to 0.75, how I have for my window here, since my window texture is just the window itself, you can leave this at 1, you can leave this at 0.99. You can make sure that you have everything constrained proportions so that everything scales at the same time, so you don't have to write in the same number every single time. But this will ensure that the code is going to work properly. So how you set up your window is really up to you. You can experiment with values however you want to get the things looking how you want. But now we have the two things. Make sure that you turn into prefabs all of these things. I'm not going to be doing it here in this demonstration because I already have my things set up. But basically, if we go back here, and I'll name this facade so I know what's happening in the inspector and I focus onto it. Now over here, I will be dragging in all my various things. I'm going to be using my own quads for this, just because it makes it a bit simpler for me. So I go into my quad thing, and again, for plain floor, let's do stuff like metal plates. For my window floor, I'm going to use this full dark window. Actually, never mind, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use this like marble brick and marble brick here. There's a little reason for that, I'll get to that in a moment. For the roof, you can really use whatever you want, doesn't really matter. The only place where it matters kind of what you put is for the ground floor. Why this matters is because the first game object that you put into here, this will be used as the door. So let's drag in a brick concrete over here, and I'm also going to use marble brick for the rest of it, just to keep general thing. I have this door haver boolean checked over here, so I can actually see the door when it's being generated, and I'm also going to take this slanted roof boolean over here and set parameters so I can actually see the roof. So now when I do it and I generate, I can see the entire thing over here, with the rusty metal being used as the roof, with the marble brick window being used over here, with everything else being used, and yada yada. Because this facade has a door, what this does is this is going to take a generation thing that's not the last or the first low column, and it's going to put whatever you've put into here and place it as the door. If again your door is not exactly meant to be a one by one building block and whatnot, you can also pretty much do what you did for like a window. You can just kind of drag in a window over here. This would work. This sometimes breaks if you want to like modify things. You can either like change like this, or it's simpler to just kind of like reset the whole thing by doing this and then just reassigning everything. So let's do window floor again, let's do a plain floor, let's do a roof. Going to add two things here again, and one for every other one. I accidentally added a few other elements, excuse me for this. But yeah, just add one more thing here. It's again like rusty metal. Let's add marble brick window for the thing, marble brick for this, marble brick over here at 2, and I don't even know what I had. Brick concrete here, sure. Generate again. Yeah, it does the stuff. I meant to put a window here, but basically what you can do is again like make a quad that has kind of like the same background or whatever into here. Like just make sure that it has a material, and then underneath it, parented, you can have like your actual door thing that you can then, for example, scale. Like if you remove this and I make this a 1.25, something like this, which you can then even like offset a little bit. And if you drag this in, it should work. It might look a bit awkward because that windows can generate right above it, and then you might have a little bit of like weird clipping or weirdness and stuff. But you can figure that out yourself however you want, or you can simply squish your door, and it's gonna look, as a one by one by one, and well, sucks to suck. But this is a facade. Have a facade, which is just a wall, and you can make it. You can make a bunch of these. Or you can just like duplicate. You move it to the side, and you can just like drag new stuff into here. Here, because now this works, that works, and where's some? Let's do some like metal plates over here and over here. And for example, I'm just not gonna have um, a window door. I'm not gonna have any windows here. Make sure that when you duplicate the thing, that you go ahead and remove all of the children. This also happens if you have something like this generated beforehand, and you close Unity and then you open it again without deleting all the children. It's going to remember all the stuff that you had in here, which could lead to some weirdness. Just delete the children, it's going to be fine, and when you regenerate, it's going to be fine. As you can see, it uses the standard brick window thingy as a thing. This is like a parented thing over here under the main stuff. All fine, all good. And then, if you want, you can play with the modifiers here to have some more showcase. But really, the numbers that you put into here and anything else that you put into here, except what you put in the wall style, will not matter when you actually get to building generation and any other generation. So, when you're going to want to prefab your facades as well to then use when we get to buildings. When you prefab your facades, make sure that you remove the children. Make sure that you only prefab this completely empty game object with just the scripts, the C17 facade and the C17 facade parameters, with all of this stuff set up into here. That's all you're going to want to do. Drop into the prefab, and then you're good to go. So, We have walls. How do we make buildings? So let's go ahead and make just a building. I will again not be using these prefabs. I'm going to be using the prefabs that I already have for the facades, just because it's going to be a bit easier for me. I'm just going to put this thing like over here. And again, we have C17. We're going to have a C17 simple building, and we have a C17 rounded corner building. These are the two types of buildings that exist in this framework, and they're going to be using the walls that you put in to do stuff. So let's start with a simple building, which simple building is going to be just a squared building. It's going to have all of these parameters here and whatnot. What you really care about again is in facades here. You just open this and you're going to want to be dragging in these C17 facades that you've made as prefabs. I'm going to drag in this simple building facade, and you can drag in multiple. I'll also put in a alt building facade. By dragging multiple facades, whenever this building is going to be generated, it's going to randomly pick one of these, and it's going to generate using that style of the facade. Make sure that you set these numbers to something that's not zero, so you can actually, when you're previewing your building, you can actually see something. And yeah, here we go. Don't worry about the build delay. These are some parameters we're going to be playing with in a bit. But if we generate now, we can see we get a building. Should just move this a little up, just so it doesn't clip as much into the ground. And here we are. We have two different types of facades into here, and they generate into a building. This is a very squared building. The reason why it's a squared building is because of these two variables over here. If you want a non-squared building, you simply check this slanted thing, which will give it this a slanted roof like this. So this is going to ensure that the buildings have a slanted roof. If you untick it, so it's going to be flat. And if you want to randomize between slanted and non-slanted, you can take this boolean. If you take this boolean, what you put into here will matter, and every single time you'll get a variation between all the stuff. The building itself will have the same style on all of the walls. So as you can see here, we always have like a few floors that have nothing, two floors about in the middle with windows on every single side, and the door will be generated on the longest side of the building. If the building's width and depth are equal, so let's also go ahead and make this a 10, so basically the building will be squared. The door is going to be randomly placed on one of the sides. Again, it's not going to be the very last or the very first thing on the row. It's going to be somewhere in between. And yeah, this is how you get just a simple building with some generation. There's also this boolean to combine meshes. This greatly helps performance, especially when you're like in play mode. And if you want to like showcase a build or yeah, just showcase in play mode for your FPS, this is going to skyrocket your performance. I would greatly recommend you check this on. You can check this off. It's going to make things a bit slower, but what this does is it ensures every single one of these is an individual object that you can click on and check. So if you want to be doing some testing, some debugging on certain stuff for like maybe like something looks weird with your textures, you can uncheck that and click on the specific thing if you want to check it out. But otherwise, I would heavily recommend that you have this checked, because it greatly minimizes the amount of things that are in here. Well, that's the building. This is the simple building. So let's go ahead and make the other type of building. I'm going to just reset, and I'm going to bring this over. Let's put this over here, and let's give this like a 2, so it's again a bit off the ground. We also have a C17 rounded corner building. So this follows pretty much the same exact rules. I'm also going to drag in an alt building facade and a simple building facade. And if I again set these values to something non-zero, pretty much going to see most of the same stuff as before. And you're going to be getting buildings with some rounded corners over here. Now, when we're going to do the preview, the rounded corner is going to be offset quite poorly, and it's going to be raised like this. This is fine. If you use the entire framework and the entire generation, this issue will be fixed. So do not worry, it will not be awkwardly sitting off the ground like this when you're actually using the entirety of the code. This is just a quirk of the preview. So if you generate again, we can see a bunch of things using the different facades, different roofs, all of that goodness. What we additionally have in here, we have rules for the rounded corner itself. We have how many curves this thing can have. We can tell if the number of curves on this should be randomized, because if you generate here, currently the number of curves is set at 4. If you generate, this thing is always going to be like a square-ish corner thing, which can also look a bit awkward with the light when it's at 4 as such. So I would recommend you either increase this to 6. If you don't have this boolean set, it will always be at that number. If we look now, this thing has 6 sides. So if you do not check this boolean, this will always be this number I set here. If you check this, and for example, I also set this to 6 every single time I generate, the corner is going to have a varying amount of sides, as you can see here. And another difference that this is going to make that you can change is how high the roof can go. This is just going to be essentially the offset for the roof, which you can change the parameters. You can go from anywhere from 0 up to 3, let's say. And if we generate, going to be able to see different heights for it. I'm just going to put the camera at a place where we're going to be able to see it from whatever angle it goes. To be careful that if you go down with the 0, it can end up going a bit inwards. Don't remember, yes, you should be able to put in floats over here, and this should ensure that the thing doesn't go as inwards as often. Let me see, for example, these numbers. Yeah, we can see that it just has a little in or out as such. So this is all it does. And the rounded corner, which I can, for example, click on, this will also follow the generation parameter of the building, and it will be aligned to the thing, because if I set this down to minus 2, kind of as it's supposed to, kind of like align it a bit with the thing, this is how it's actually going to look like when we do the actual generation, and you can see that the floors match up with the floors on the rounded thing. Great. So now that I've shown you how to generate a facade, make that all into prefabs, and how to set your buildings, also make sure that you go ahead and you set your buildings into prefabs. You're going to want to do the same thing. Remove all of the children, remove all of the generation, make sure that you just have your empty buildings, drag those in, make them into prefabs, and now we can go ahead and play with the real deal. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these things, and now you're going to want to make an empty game object. You can call this like your managers or whatever. Make sure that this transform is reset and is left here, and you're going to want to add the following things. You're going to want a area manager. You're going to want a grid manager, and you're going to want a generation manager. These are the 3 scripts that will control everything that you're going to be doing. The main thing that we're going to want to be looking at is into here in the generation manager, where you'll be dragging in what you're going to be generating. You are going to want to put your buildings into here, the building sets we have made. We can grab them from like over here, just drag these into here. These are prefabs that I have. And you're also going to want a road prefab. How you make the road prefab is also quite simple. It is best that I simply look at my own prefabs and I drag in the road prefab that I have. This would work. However, my Unity seems to be a little frozen at the moment. Not entirely sure why I have so many errors, but let's just ignore that. That should really not matter. Yes, now I can just drag the same here. Something's complaining here, but don't worry about it. So what this needs is, it should be an object that has a mesh renderer, a mesh filter, which here you need to drag in some mesh, whatever mesh, something preferably that's kind of squared, kind of like this. I have this like metal tile collect straight that I grabbed from somewhere. It looks like this. So have some model that kind of looks like this. You can get this specific model from one of the engineer bootcamps. That's what I'm using. Just make sure that you have something that vaguely has the shape of a road. So just drag that into here and into here. You're going to want to change these numbers, I think, depending on whatever model you use. This you'll just have to experiment with. Don't really have to worry about this. Definitely don't have this checked in. You're definitely going to want this curve script. You can keep it empty. Mesh renderer, and in here drag in whatever tileable material you have for your road, and then an auto UV script as well. And again, mostly copy all of these parameters, like have all this checked, have this at 1.1. The important bit is this. This is the main script that does all of the magic. Make sure that it has a curve, a mesh renderer, a mesh filter, and the auto UV script. And make sure that you use some model that vaguely looks like a rope. So just have that prefabbed and ready to go. Because once you have that, you can drag that into here. My Unity is loading. You can drag this right into here. And ultimately, this is mostly everything that you need, and you're kind of ready to go and start generating. My Unity is still being a little slow, but you can then go into here and start modifying all the stuff that you want. You have for the area manager, min area size, max area size, your grid manager, the size of your grid. I'm going to just make this a 25 by 25. I'm going to set these as the minimum to a 5 by 5. I'm going to go ahead and draw the grid just so I can see it nicely over here. And I'm going to, in the generation manager, set the max build height to something that is not 0 so I can actually see some buildings. So I'm just going to go ahead and click generate everything, and we have our buildings. Wow, would you look at that? So what's actually going on here, and how does this actually work? I'm just going to click this to destroy all of the buildings here and clear all the areas over here, and I'm just going to regenerate the grid. So this has a few building blocks, and I'm going to take you through the generation process step by step as it kind of happens behind the scenes when you actually click the generate everything button. What this program first does is it generates a grid. You have a grid size here that you can modify however you want. You can make it bigger, smaller. You can change the node size to be bigger, smaller, and whatnot. And then you have some debug stuff essentially here, so you can see the outline of the grid or just the grid itself. The grid has colors that depend on whether these nodes are occupied and kind of what's on them. You don't have to worry about that too much unless you start running into some issues. Yeah, you can use this to kind of tell a bit of what's going on. Then you have the area manager. The area manager takes the grid and it breaks it down into areas. It looks to see where does it have available space to place areas within these parameters that you've set here, and then it kind of algorithmically places a bunch of these areas as such that will then be used for generation of buildings. The sizes that you're setting in here are the parameters for the areas in nodes. So this means that the minimum area size will be a 5 by 5 node. So we'll never see an occupied area that is smaller than a 5 by 5 in terms of nodes. And we'll go up to 10 by 10 in nodes. And of course, the actual values for every single thing is kind of randomized in between. If there is any area that is smaller in nodes, it will be left empty upon generation, and there's simply going to be gaps in there. So remember this, that this is in nodes, this is not a raw size. After you generate all of these areas, the program goes ahead and snaps all of these areas to the grid. In order to visualize the areas, you have a few tools. You can draw the area outlines so you can kind of see them. You can also draw their handles, which will come in handy a bit later, as well as the names. If you really want to see stuff about each individual area, the handles especially are going to allow you to kind of modify the areas, and the names just kind of let you know what areas kind of what type. It gets a little spammy on screen, but if you like go and start like zooming into a specific thing, you're going to be able to see it quite clearly. I'm going to disable these for now. I'm just going to have the outlines so that when I snap everything to the grid, this now fills up all the things. It sets all the areas as being occupied. As we can see, the areas that are too small are left unoccupied, simply going to be gaps. And all the areas are now snapped so that they perfectly fit into here. So once we're done, we can simply populate the areas. Boom. And now we have a town. The generation has a particular quirk that I have added in the way that it works. How it works is that in the center, we're always going to have shorter buildings. Not only are we going to have shorter buildings, only the buildings in the center are going to be able to have slanted roofs around the corners. I made this because I especially wanted further in the back to only have big tall blocks that are blocky and very communist era type looking things. This is essentially some neighborhood stuff, which is one of the things in the rubrics that you can get some extra points for. This doesn't really change anything on like how you have to set things up. It's just to remember that always kind of towards the far back in the like later half of kind of the grid, you're always going to get very blocky and generally taller buildings. And that's how it is. You can keep populating the areas to like keep using the same zones and just have different buildings using the kind of same generation rules. You can regenerate everything. This is just the simplest way to do it, which just takes your grid, takes your numbers, and just generates a city essentially. And there's one more feature that you can use, especially if you want to have a bit more control over stuff. Everything that you generate will be added in these generated locations and road locations. These are only visible generally for the sake of debugging. You won't really have to worry about it. If you want to do some debugging, check some stuff that's going on, you can look into here and you can use the name of the location to kind of check what's going on if something is going weird. But what you might want to use is this thing here, a pre-placed locations. This will basically ensure that you have locations that always exist with the specific parameters that you put in. So I have two things here. The location types are as follows: standard block, tall block, park, citadel, and road. I would recommend you don't use road. You can if you want to, but how they look like is, and this is where it's useful to also draw the handles and display the names of these. I'm going to give these areas an actual size so that they're not just non-existent. And I'm going to offset this little guy over here. This is where the handles come in handy, because you can actually grab it and move it around, and you can also scale this area however you want, and you can also just move it with the arrows and whatnot. And this makes it handy to just kind of move it around here and whatnot. I also have this guy over here, which is also like a 0, 0, making like a 5 by 5. I'll put him like over there, sure, and make him like a bit bigger as well. So I have these pre-placed areas. Before you do anything, of course you can still generate everything and they'll be taken into account. If you do it manually, for some reason, you're going to want to click this handle pre-placed location. It's going to like set the area for it. Alongside it's going to add roads around it. And it snaps it to the grid automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. And then, for example, if I generate everything, I have two standard blocks over here and here. If I generate everything, if you keep an eye out on those locations, every single time I do it, those things will always be there with those exact sizes. Now, of course, what's going to be on them is going to depend. For a standard block, it's always going to be something that will be below half of the maximum build height, and it can be slanted, it can have a rounded corner, so on and so forth. I can change them to tall blocks if I always want to have tall blocks in those positions. What you might want to use them for is some location types that aren't used in the normal random generation. That would be park. Park is going to be an empty lot. So we can see here that this is a park, park 0. If I generate, I'm always going to have an empty lot over here, always. Whenever I keep regenerating, and that park of that specific size is always going to be there, no matter what. As long as this location is in, that park will always be there. And for the stall block, what I can actually do is I can, for example, set it to Citadel. Citadel is the big, bulky thing in City 17, which can be used as a landmark. For that, you'll need to drag in your Citadel Prefab, whatever object you want to use for this. You can drag in any game object. It really doesn't matter. It just needs to be a thing that you scale however you want. I just have this thing. And what I would recommend you do with it is you don't actually want to put this on the grid. I would actually say you want to like take this and move it away. You can have pre-placed areas and you can have areas that are not on the grid, and they will still generate outside of it. So if you also want to add in like a bunch of other tall blocks and stuff outside of this grid, that can also work. So I'm going to go ahead, and since the thing's set as a citadel and I have a little object over here, if I'm going to destroy the generated areas, which is going to destroy everything except the 2 that I have, I'm just gonna quickly destroy all the buildings and just regenerate the grid. Just simplify stuff. And now, if I generate everything, again, I have the park over here, and I have the citadel over here. Keep in mind that whatever object you drag in to the citadel will be scaled with your node size. So if your node size is bigger, your citadel is going to be that many times bigger on all sides. I simply made this because it makes a bit more sense with the city generation. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your thing, that your citadel can be quite big if you increase the node size. If it's too big, just move it even further away. So when you generate it, it's just further away. So when you actually look in the scene itself, it's going to be fine. We're going to go ahead and set the park at 0, 0. And I'm okay. Again, we're going to destroy all generated areas and all the buildings and just regenerate the grid. Just because this makes a bit more sense, and like this is how kind of like City 17 actually is. If you look at like the first level, I'm going to set this at like a 25 by 25 scale, just so it's, you know, balanced. I'm gonna set the grid size to 50 by 50 because, again, balanced. It's just how I like it. I'm just gonna generate everything, and yeah, we have all of these things with, you know, taller blocks in the back, like some fancier, smaller buildings towards the center, a big empty thing over here, and the citadel over there in the distance. And they're just preset, and whenever I can generate and I keep regenerating this, all this stuff just stays in there as well, which I find pretty neat. Yeah, this is most of how the generation looks like. For example, change these and make these slightly smaller, and also make this smaller just so we see more buildings. Yeah, one thing that you want to keep in mind is that the generation for these buildings does have a minimum. So if you set the minimum area sizes to be too small, and this kind of depends on also a bit of like the node size, you might start seeing walls disappear. That is fine. Simply make your area bigger or increase your general node size, whatever. Just make sure that the buildings themselves are bigger. What you want is make sure that basically like a basic building has at least a length of 5 on every single side, because when you generate a rounded corner building, it's going to make it a bit smaller. It's going to make it smaller by 1 so that it can fit the rounded corner, so that it doesn't like start clipping into the road. And the minimum size for a building is 4, because otherwise there's some weirdness with the door. Yeah, so just keep in mind, if you see buildings missing walls, make your area parameters just a bit bigger, increase the minimum so that the buildings are a bit larger, so that they look fine. I'm also going to go ahead and show you this in game, how it actually looks like if you want to showcase this during game. There's quite a bit of functionality in there that you can do to like quickly test and change some stuff and things and show stuff. This lends itself a bit better to presentation, I would say, because when you actually generate while you're playing, the buildings are built gradually. You're going to be able to like actually see them. So over here, um, I forgot to add in a few more things, which I had on my other thing. So you on the camera thing, you can add a, I think it's like it's a camera controls that just has this, which basically gives you the movement of the camera that you have in the Unity editor, but just in game. And I'm going to go to my scene, this scene over here, just save all of this. And as this is loading, I'm going to grab the UI that I had in there, because it just has this and this. It just has some stuff on screen and a bit of logic that can be used for you to like track some stuff. So if you click play over here, you can see you have an FPS tracker and you have some rules on screen, and now I can also like move in here. You can see the Citadel, and you're going to want to press G to generate everything. It's just the same stuff. You can see the FPS drops a little bit, but the moment that everything is generated, the FPS is quite good, quite stable. It depends a bit on like how you set your lighting and stuff like that. But I mean, yeah, you know, you can move around. If you press P, you regenerate everything in there. As you can see the buildings being generated with like a floor by floor. And yeah, if you want to just regenerate everything, you press G again. And again, you can check the FPS. And that's all cool and fine and dandy. And if you want to do a build, while you're in the build, if you press escape, it's going to close the application. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how you set some things up. And if I can give you a few other tips, if you go to window and into rendering and into lighting, a few things that you can play. If I put this over here so you can actually see it. If you go to environment, just change two things. Find skybox that kind of looks cloudy, because that's gonna add quite a bit of it, of vibe to your thing. And then go into other settings and just check fog and play with this, play with density and play with the number, because it's gonna make it look a lot more cool. If you had the little skybox, and then also if you go to your directional light and you kind of change this to a more like orange, and you play with the numbers, it's gonna look a lot more like the thing itself. For example, here I can go to my own scene, save the changes, sure. And you can see how just playing around with those things just a little bit can really make the thing look a lot cooler. Just move the lighting a bit, play with the fog values, and it can look really, really cool. But yeah, that's how you use this whole thing. If you have any more questions, let me know. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck.